Okay, it is Thursday, August 26th. This is the first time that we're running the meeting at 5 p.m. Pacific time, which I believe is 9 a.m. Japan time, right? Around there?
Yeah, that's right. It's 9
Yeah,
here.
awesome. And we have a special guest. We have, well, hopefully a regular guest now. Ryan Lane is here. And then uh, he used to be with us at Lyft, and then he's still contributing code. Very happy to see your many, many contributions recently. Very much appreciative of all the help that you've given us. Um, I'll just go ahead and then paste in the chat the meeting doc if you guys wanted to add in any agenda document items or anything like that. But typically, what we'll do in this meeting, just to kind of go through some housekeeping, like talk a little bit about recent features and issues. And I do want to bring up a topic about Neo4j 4.x upgrade later on in this meeting. And then anything else you guys want to talk about, just add that right here. And then let's see. Yeah, that's basically it. So I'm going to go ahead and then kind of go off on my spiel about stuff that happened over the past month. So let's kind of go through that. And then, so the last time that we met was back in July 22. So probably about right here. All right. So we got some pretty neat things. Support for EBS snapshots and volumes, AWS Secrets Manager, SQS support, some fixes in the Azure module, and I decided to decomp some of our Okta syncs so it's a little bit easier to run depending on your environment. Bug fixes, removing some cleanup, adding some documentation with our library dependency graph. So if you want to, I think there's a bit of a larger effort to kind of use cartography for the purpose of understanding your dependencies, particularly with like libraries and then the transitivities between them. So this is something that we're sort of thinking about right now. Linters, and again, I continue more on some Okta work, and then Ryan has added even more features with the AWS config and security hub support. So pretty busy month last time for all of us. So that's pretty awesome. And then nothing that I really want to particularly highlight right now. Well, actually, I'm going to turn it over to the group right now. Is there any issues or PRs right now that anybody wanted to discuss over here live?
Yeah, so the one for tagging is some of the queries that I've been trying to do have been kind of rough. Specifically, I'm trying to find resources that support tags but are not tagged. And finding things in Neo4j that are not something is relatively difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying to figure out a way to be able to query for things that should have tags but don't. And I haven't figured out a very good way of doing that, but that's why I had opened this ticket a while back.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so trying to figure out some way, like not necessarily doing it in this particular way, but just figuring out some way to be able to find resources that should be tagged but aren't would be nice.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I guess the way that you're proposing it is that for every instance, like every single node will have this, if it supports tagging, then it'll have an edge that connects to the node. So it's kind of like we're building a little bit of a metagraph then, huh?
Yeah, but I'm not sure if this is really the right way. It's just like a way I was thinking of it first.
Sure.
I mean, maybe there's a better way of doing this that I just haven't thought of.
Hmm.
Since it does seem a little extreme to make a relationship to every single item in the graph, just for meta purposes. But yeah.
Yeah, or maybe like we could do something like say, I don't know, like say EC2 instance type, some a meta thing like that, and then it goes to voice tagging, and then actually, or do it like this, and then if we could do something like that, and then like you would have a sync process where it would query the documentation or some other authoritative canonical source and then put that in there. I don't know.
Yeah, I was thinking of having items have an attribute. The only downside is then we have to add an index for every item with the attribute. Maybe that's not the end of the world, but because if it's unindexed, then it takes
Yeah.
like some queries may not even end. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, things that you really do need, yeah, they do need indexes. Um, yeah, it really like from my understanding of this, we don't want to be drawing edges to every single EC2 instance, to every single IAM user and things like that, especially if it's only going to be used for meta purposes. I think that the way to solve this, if we were to do it, would be to add like meta nodes for every single type. And I think that there would be like, I think that we've talked about like there may be other uses for a sort of metagraph. I can't, it doesn't, it kind of escapes me at the top of my head right now, but I think it could be useful for other things.
So this would be like a metadata node you'd have attached to like a given EC2 instance.
I wouldn't say like a, so in this particular example, like we wouldn't, hmm, I don't know, what would it look like? Like, would we attach it to an EC2 instance? Or actually, let me move this to the doc so maybe you guys can sketch it out also.
Yeah, and mostly it's being able to like query the graph about information about itself, essentially. So like it's not just necessarily
Hmm.
just for tagging information, but it's like um, being able to query the graph to kind of introspect itself. So in this case, it's like um, does the node type support tagging? But I mean, there could be other things that we would want to ask in the graph that's related to the node types of like things that they support or things along those lines.
Yeah, there was something else that I wanted to use a sort of meta approach for it. Like, hmm, I had an idea, like this is like tangentially related, but if we could have something in there to record sync run state, you know, like if you could have something where like if we know that this, if you know that a sync or a partial sync was correct or not correct, then you could log that on this sort of chain of, you know, you have like a graph result node and then it kind of points to the another graph result node or a run node, and then that way you can kind of go and see like it's sort of your log of how is the graph doing at any given time. So you use the graph to keep track of its own state, and then from there you could probably have it record some metric on how confident you are in your state of the graph and how confident it reflects the state of the world. Yeah, again, really fuzzy, but these are some other introspection ideas.
Yeah, I think I remember it seeing that that issue. Yeah, and I think that's maybe why I thought of doing this. So
Yeah. Um, you know, lots of different, okay, so I guess if we have the data like this, how would we make use of this? Like what would be the way that another script comes in and then makes use of this information?
I think in this particular one, it would be kind of like the query that I had
Uh-huh.
in the ticket, where it's
Okay,
like
yeah.
where you do a query. It's like should it support if it should support tagging, then um, yeah, kind of like along those lines.
Ah,
But and that specific um, instance, I think you would need to be able to actually query the node itself. Um, yeah, because one of the issues that I was running into is that like for is that like a lot of node types or like the labels support tagging, and so then the query turns into like trying to like have every type of label, like having to do a query that supports every type of label, or having to do a query against the labels, but the labels themselves are unindexed and cause a scan. So it would scan essentially the entire database. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm still not 100% sure of how to deal with this. So mostly I was just trying to see if like anyone had ideas, but it's not the end of the world. Like I have a kind of crappy query that works for some things, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's very bad. So I don't know. I'll think more about it. If you guys have any ideas, then just yeah, let me know.
Another thing that might be related to this, I'm not sure if it helps the scenario, but Kunal has talked a little bit about eventually moving to a state where we can introduce the idea of having data objects instead of, every single, you want to merge in an object, you're kind of hand jamming these queries and whatnot. And then so if we had some sort of idea of like maybe perhaps a marshmallow schema or something like that, some kind of object relational model, maybe we could encode some information in there that would serve as some introspection, something in there where we say that, oh, we know that this supports tagging somehow. Granted, it's a little bit manual because you would have to do that for every single one, but then I mean, unless you have like some way of discovering that, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think the ORM thing has a lot of different, pros and cons. One of the pros is that you get standardized documentation, and we can have some sort of meta field in every object that, we'd have a meta supports tagging thing, and maybe it wouldn't even be exposed in the graph. Maybe we have a programmatic way to go through the documentation and figure out everything but that gets a little weird. And at that point, it almost feels like adding the supports tagging might just be a good field to put on all resources. I thought that
Yeah.
might probably the easiest way now, but
Yeah. I actually like the ORM approach, and I was thinking of that for other reasons as well. So like right now you have to do a sync on a schedule, and it would be nice to be able to have more continuous, like you watch a stream and you pull objects in as they come in and they're new. And one of the reasons that's slightly difficult right now is because of the way that the syncing is being done, and not like you grab the data, you transform it, and then you load it. But most of them are done as grab all of the objects and then transform all of the objects and then wind all of the objects in, and like the transformation is pretty manual. And so like if there was a way of just like encapsulating the object and then saying like transform and load this thing where it comes in through an ORM, then it doesn't matter if it's like a group of objects or it's just a single object. Like you could take them in as they come in and load them individually. I know obviously an issue there is like the way that we do like the tagging to determine if objects are fresh or not, but it's definitely a step that makes that easier at least.
yeah, I agree. And not to mention, it probably make development flows easier too, and it allow us to add a lot more standardization across a lot of the whole project. So yeah, it is longer term. I mean, you mentioned like having events kind of stream in. I mean, then it opens up this whole can of worms of like, could we build the graph of CloudTrail and make it a real time graph and do a bunch of other crazy stuff? That's unrelated. I guess that's tangential, but
Yeah.
it would be cool. It would be very cool.
I like that these ideas are coming up. What we're seeing is sort of the evolution of this tool from something that was like very much experimental, and then now it's something where like we're thinking about, oh, how would we integrate this in like something more, I guess, mature, and then these interesting data pipelines and all these different paradigms like events and whatnot. Yeah, so pretty excited about that. I don't have a super good answer for this scenario though. Like Kunal
Yeah,
said,
that's okay.
yeah.
I think it's just like something that's maybe okay to just think about for a while, because it's something that I've kind of worked around slightly, but yeah, not in a great way.
Yeah. So maybe I'll make a note of it that like we talked about in this meeting, and then like people can refer to the recording if they want to see the like conversation form of it, and then I'll add a keep fresh, because this is kind of interesting. I would like to keep the conversation going about introspection. And what else do I want to say about that? Yeah, I think that makes sense. Okay. All right. Any other issues or pull requests or topics that you guys wanted to bring up? Cool. Like, if
Yeah,
not, then yeah, go ahead.
I kind of want to ask Ryan. Do you have any use cases for having like temporal data in the graph, like keeping time, like keeping a snapshot of each day, or just having a sense of time in the graph?
I mean, it would be nice to be able to have data that is by time, just so that you can see like how things have changed over time. But it's right now it's not. It's definitely not like the hugest thing on our particular list. I mean, I think having it in the same database would be somewhat. It might make the querying relatively difficult, but one thought that I had was that like the newer versions of Neo4j have support for multiple databases in the same instance, and so like one possibility is like having each run snapshot the data into a different database, and then that way each database is a different version of the same one. So if you need to query temporally, like you could query the current set of data in this database, and then if you need to get older data, it's like in this database, and then you can keep how long you want through multiple databases. You have to do multiple queries, but at least it would be then the same query just on a different target.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that seems like a pretty straightforward way to go about it. The reason I ask is because we've had some use cases within Lyft that we might need some time series, like just look at old snapshots, mostly for like incident response, to see what things look like at some given day.
Yep.
We're trying to find the best way to do it.
Yeah, we've had some hacky poor man's way of doing it where we take a daily backup, and then so like you can go back at any point in time and then grab that backup, load it locally on your laptop, be like, oh, this is what it looked like that day. But then of course this is, yeah, it gets the job done, but it's definitely not what I would really call historical data.
Yeah.
And then like we've had like the other different ways. I think that Nico is going to do a blog post on this of like using things like we tried Airflow. It didn't work at Lyft. We have like some custom thing that's just way too difficult to do, where you like do like ETLs from the Neo4j thing to something else to receive that data. And we decided to go with Flight instead to go do that. So yeah, that's another option if you want to do like other different processing on data frames.
Yeah, Marco had done the thing where he was pulling it in the historical data into Elasticsearch, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean the only downside of all of these things is that like now you have two query models.
Yeah, it depends on the scenario that you need. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, pros and cons too, because I mean, like I thought about ingesting some data from Cartography into our security log ingest system, and the security incident response team loves that because now they can query the data in Kibana using KQL. So they actually kind of liked it, but it isn't a very elegant solution. Agreed. Like.
Yeah, I mean it's good if you want to do like specific searches, right? Because like some of the things that you want to do like really kind of require the graph. But then other things, it's like if you're looking for very specific things through the search, it's not so bad.
Yeah, and then that's the problem because then the value of the graph is null. I mean, you're just exporting this structured data out again. So, yeah.
I mean, like the value of the graph is kind of like this analysis layer where you're aggregating everything and you're getting like all of these joins together, and then like you find something that makes sense and you take that slice and you put it and emit it out to places where it makes more sense to put it all in one place. Yeah, for like what they need out of it.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, like we for instance are exporting some of the data into New Relic, so like time series data. So we have sets of queries that have information like how many vulnerabilities are from CrowdStrike and Sneak are exist for like a particular service, and so we have those like queries that run every hour and then export the data to New Relic, and then we can have a graph over time of like is the service actually fixing their issues or are they not fixing their issues? So yeah, but like that, like again, these are like I think the idea is that you figure out the data that you want up front and like how you're going to use the data first, and then you like particularly output those things in another format. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. That's true. Actually, funny, we do the same kind of thing for vulnerability management, but
I love that we have the
sense.
same problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, you basically described our vuln management flow right now. Yeah. So I guess like, yeah, we use the graph for like what it is good at, and then which is like all those correlations. From at this specific point in time, we haven't really figured out a way how to do temporal. Maybe it could be good in the future. Happy to have somebody else explore that. But right now, that's not our strength. And so our strength is aggregate, and then you can go and consume it someplace else. And speaking of which, I think that we talked a little bit about me and Ryan kind of talked a little bit offline, maybe about like ways to view it and like web front ends and stuff like that. I don't know. This is something that's always really interesting to me. Like, I have always wanted to build a web front end or have something, I guess, be able to present some of these things from graph form to like maybe a REST API that somebody else can get. I don't know. I made that Hacktoberfest issue like a while ago, but well, it's kind of crazy that in 2 more months it's going to be October again and Hacktoberfest again. But anyway, I'm just kind of babbling right now. If you guys remember what I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
The front end.
Yeah.
Is there progress?
Yeah. Oh, I actually wrote a front end. So we have one at PayPay. That takes that you have a YAML configuration file that has like panels and queries for it with like and then you can take those and you can organize them into rows and columns basically. So I can't like demo it on the recording just because like some of the data even on my developer laptop is real data, whereas
For sure.
most of it's fake, but a little bit of it's real. So in a recording, I can't demo it, but if at the end, if we end the recording, I can show it to you guys.
Sure.
Awesome.
And then like later on, if you're, well, I mean, more than happy to receive another one of Ryan Lane's wonderful contributions.
Yeah, I'll have to like see how much effort it will be to open source it. It's relatively standalone, so I don't think it would be too difficult. I think what we were aiming for is making sure that it's like properly usable and something we want to open source before we go through the effort of doing so. I think at this point, like that it is open sourceable. I think part of the thing that we wanted to do is like here we're using Backstage for a developer portal, and the thought was to integrate the cartography site into Backstage. But then the issue is that I think it's going to take me quite a while to actually do that. Like I don't have a developer set up for Backstage, and it uses Material UI and all of those things. But I think I'm using a newer version. There's a whole bunch of like things that's going to cause me probably to have to do this over the next 6 months or something along those lines. So, and I'm also questioning whether it's like a good idea to make it something that's just a plugin of another thing or to have it standalone. Because for instance, Cartography Community, it's going to be harder to integrate if you have to also use Backstage just to use it. So I was trying to think of a way to like have it be standalone, but also make it usable as a plugin maybe. I'll have to figure all of that out. But my thought was it's probably just fine by itself. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense if there's like heavy dependencies and things like that.
Yeah, because I mean, like it, for the most part, all it is a React like Material UI front end, Python backend, and then the Python backend has features for like basically like delivering the front end. It also has single sign-on for Neo4j. Because Neo4j doesn't support it. So basically, when you access the site, it will create a Neo4j user for you. That will expire after a given period of time. So yeah, I think ours is set for 12 hours or something along those lines. But when you log in, it generates a user, and then there's something in the back end that runs that checks your expiration dates, and if it's over the expiration date, it deletes the user. And that's it's creating and deleting these things based on I think we're using AWS single sign-on. So it checks your OAuth token, it validates it, and then uses your email address as your username, and then generates a password for you and delivers the password back to the front end, because the front end just directly uses the Neo4j client.
That's
And then it
awesome.
also gives you like a link to the Neo4j console and lets you copy your password in so that you can log into the console as well.
Do you know if 4.0 has deep links?
I don't think it does. That's kind of one of those things that I wanted, was at least the ability to like auto log you in from, instead of having to copy and
Yeah.
paste passwords in. But I don't think it does. I was looking at their JavaScript, and it's really very standalone. So yeah. One thing that I
Interesting.
was very much looking forward to in 4.x was ACLs. Just because like right now, anyone that can log in can change all the data, and that's kind of problematic.
Yeah, get some protection. Yeah, you can have someone go in and just accidentally do a detach delete and
Yeah, and it's
or
not the end of the
something.
world, because
Yeah.
it's like a few hours later, all the data comes back in, but like it's problematic.
Yeah, especially like if you're using it to drive like any other decision making, like if you have if you're relying on something like a first seen date, well, you blew that node away and then your first seen date is gone now, even if it comes back up again. So that's like the one thing that I would see as needing an actual graph backup useful for.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and then I mean, similarly, like someone could go in and just change everything, right? Like not
Yeah,
delete it,
yeah.
but like subtly manipulate it. So yeah, it's problematic. I've definitely been looking forward to 4.x.
Sounds good. Yeah, so that's a good segue to like this next topic on how are we going to do this 4.x upgrade? Some data points. The end of life of 3.5 is going to be the end of November. And so ideally, I want to target getting everything in cartography migrated to that new query scheme and supporting 4.x by that time. And then so people who are still relying on the 3.5 versions, then they just won't get new features. They can just use like our previous releases and things like that. But then going into the future, yeah, we're going to be only 4.x. It doesn't make sense to support two separate forks or two separate branches, especially if the underlying database is not going to be supported. And I know personally that at Lyft right now, it's going to be very difficult for me to upgrade the database and everything else. I'm going to have to put up with that. So anybody else that's going through this pain, I feel you. I will feel it very directly. So yeah, we will go through this. And then so I guess the mechanics of how this will happen, there is already a PR that was contributed to us from, I believe, Neo4j itself. So that's really cool of them. And so we'll have to, I'm not sure what the best way for two people to collaborate on a PR is. Like, we have to get in contact with them, maybe send a PR to their PR. I've never done that before, but yeah. Anyway, has everything I say like makes sense so far?
Mm.
Yeah, so yeah, we're just gonna cut the cord by end of November, get all those queries in the right state, and then as changes need to happen, I expect that the first release that supports 4.x will probably not be very stable, and then bear with us, it'll get better.
Yeah, I mean, are they still actively collaborating on the PR, or because I mean, if not, you can just pull the the commits from their PR and make a new PR and just like work on top of that one.
Yeah, I
And
think.
it'll still properly tie them to the commits and stuff.
Yeah, I think Dave has been awesome with replying to like my other questions and stuff like that. I just been haven't had a chance to like go back to it. So yeah, we will ping back in this comment thread again. Yeah, but I'm wondering like, so it looks like there's all of these other different new conflicts and stuff, and then I don't want to give Dave more work to go and do any of this stuff. So if I wanted to go and help out, like I guess the mechanics of that would be I make a PR against his PR, his branch.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure.
Anyway, I'll add a comment here and we will figure that out. But for everybody tuning in, this is what is going on with 4.x. And I'll take that on. And so this here, and what else did I want to think about? What other features about with 4.x are you particularly excited about?
I mean, for us primarily, it was the access control lists. Okay. And there's also security logs in 4x, but they're enterprise only, so it's not, top of my list.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I wonder too. Oh, I guess another thing too, like another decision would be, should we? I guess since we haven't done an upgrade in forever, I think that their latest is 4.3, so we should probably try to target the latest minor version. So might as well. Same amount of work.
Oh yeah, I guess the other features would be multiple databases.
Okay.
Something that would be nice because like being able to dump a snapshot and then reload it into a separate database would be kind of nice. Where you don't have to spin up an entire instance to get the data in.
I wonder if that's going to change any of our app code though. If we're going to have to expose another parameter for maybe. Yeah, that shouldn't be too hard though. If we have
well,
to.
I think by default there's a default database that when you connect, if you don't pass a string, it connects to that database. So because I'm using newer libraries to connect to 3.5 because it's still compatible. So that it will just be compatible with the new one when it switches.
Makes sense. All right, yeah, that's all I had on the 4.x thing. Let's see, is there anything back over here? Anything else you guys wanted to bring up? Otherwise, I'll turn the recording off, and then we can go and talk about other things.
Well, I was trying to think about how to parallelize the sync process. One thought that I had was the way that we're running cartography, we use a custom script, and it kind of like tells cartography like the ordering of how things are going to load and things like that. And my thought was that since it supports like passing the tag into the in through the process so that it doesn't generate its own tag, would be to use something like step functions in AWS, and then have each portion of the job as its own step function, and then figure out which things can run at the same time and which things need to be ordered. Like obviously creating indexes needs to be first and running the analysis job needs to be last. But then like being able to run like our PagerDuty integration at the same time as like AWS integration would be fine. Or even for AWS itself, it would be fine for us to sync every individual account in parallel. But there's code changes we would need for that. But like my thought would be to run each step by passing in the tag. And that way, like the step functions would be like, okay, I'm going to create the indexes. I'm going to like do whatever this initial step is, then run all of these things in parallel. And then when all of those things are finished, run the the analysis jobs, for instance, or any of like the cross account jobs or stuff like that. And that's one of the things for AWS that I thought would be maybe the only thing that we really need to change in the code would be to separate the steps for syncing the accounts, and then have a separate step for cross account analysis of it AWS. So like right now it's just like sync AWS, whereas it could be like sync each individual account and now run jobs that like do any of the cross AWS logic or cross account logic.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, that'd be interesting to see the step function, like what you said right there. And so I guess, are you thinking of passing the same update tag to every single okay, cool.
Yeah, that way they all have the same update tag. Because I know one of the issues is that like if they have different update tags, then they're going to end up cleaning up data that they were not supposed to clean up. So if they have the same tag, it's still one run. It's just the run is separated across processes and run in parallel.
Maybe I'll talk a little bit about the way that we kind of do things parallel, just to maybe bounce a couple of ideas. But I'll preface this by saying that it is definitely not a super. I don't particularly like it super much, but it's what we got right now. So yeah, we do the custom script thing also, where you kind of define all your sync stages, and then each of those sync stages, they run as part of a Kubernetes cron job. And so the cron pod will spin up when on a schedule, and then you have like different crons for different things that you want to sync at a different time. And then for us, we've seen that different people need different data at different cadences. And then so we found that more often than not, like if we wanted to sync everything AWS, that will take a very long time to the point where it's just not very usable. So we're finding that our custom scripts will do things like, oh, this needs just this bit from ECR for this particular region. And then after that, we're going to go and get all of the permissions associated with that, and then get all of the, I don't know, Okta groups associated with that, because that's a particular flow that we really want to be. These are the data dependencies that we want to see exactly right now. So we'll structure our crons based on not entirely on data type, but more on, I guess, the business scenario that they need right there. And we'll have something else that we're playing around with is we have a separate cron for drift detection. And then so the drift detection thing will enforce things like we have an authorization system, and then if the idea is that the authorization system should be able to enforce its view of the world on everything else. So everything is centralized to this one thing. And so if people are in this group, then they should be created associated identities in other environments such as Okta and AWS. And then so if there comes to be some kind of drift where the authoritative source of truth deviates from what it actually is in real life, then we should be able to take action on real life and then kind of reconcile those things. And so this runs in its own cron, and then this happens, I would say, as often as we kind of want it to, and then so all the data dependencies there are kind of captured in its own cron. I don't like this very much because, well, now you're kind of, by definition, your data is always updating, and therefore it is never really consistent, for whatever that means. But then again, if you are updating it frequently enough, it gets the job done. And so like for the scenarios that we do have, it's working just fine. Like the pure beautiful way of doing it would be to have like a real, I guess, DAG workflow with it. You would deploy something like Airflow, you would deploy Flight workflow to go do something like that. Honestly, it's just been like too much work to migrate a lot of that logic over to another system that run all that code.
Yeah, I mean the step functions is essentially creating a DAG. Yeah, that's what we were thinking of, was being able to run it in that way. Being able to run it more, like some things more frequently, is actually very appealing. For us, there are some types of data that we definitely want to be more fresh than others. In that situation, are you setting the update tag to be the update tag that was the previously used one, or like are you generating update tags based on like like a time frame or something along those lines, or is the update tag just always whatever the current generated timestamp is?
Last one. It is always whatever the current generated timestamp is. And so there's, if there are, what we found is that, yeah, that means that like there are many different things with many different update tags. And so it so far has not been a huge problem for us in practice.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, as long as the same thing is running the same, it won't clean up data that has the wrong update tag because it's the only thing managing that data.
You just have to be very cognizant about like what are your, I guess, what things are updating what are your data flows? Because, but then again, if you're updating stuff frequently enough, it's not a super huge deal.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's interesting. Okay. Yeah. So I might still think about doing the step functions thing, but that is a good idea of like running the like some jobs independently. I always have to figure out like make sure that like the independent jobs aren't running at the same time as the step function.
Yeah, like what again, like I said, like this is not something that I'm super proud of. I don't if I had more time to get this out, then I would have definitely tried to be a little bit more structured in that approach. But moving all of our stuff over to Kubernetes was kind of done in a really mad rush. And then I was just thinking, okay, well, everything is falling apart. Everything is broken and alarming. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm not able to get the refreshes on time. And then I have very upset customers with the data. Everything's in all different states of stale. And then so how do I get that done? Well, let's aggressively pick the things that actually need to get that freshness right now.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons we were looking at sub functions was because it has Kubernetes integration. So like there's a controller that will automatically generate all of your Kubernetes jobs based on the step function. So it runs inside of Kubernetes.
Awesome.
Yeah, and you can define it in the inside of your actual Kubernetes code. So, and it will manage your step functions for you. Yeah.
Oh, for your Neo4j, like talking about like infrastructure and things like that, are you running it on a dedicated instance, or is it like do you have it as part of like a stateful set or something, or?
Yeah, it's a stateful set.
Okay, and then I guess your communication is over like some load balancer then, or?
Oh yeah, this was actually a huge pain in the ass.
Yeah.
So, let me look at our setup real quick because it works out really well in what we're doing in practice. So, but it was not the most fun thing in the world to actually set up. So we're running an NLB to talk to Neo4j over its to talk to Neo4j we use an NLB that has SSL termination enabled so that we don't have to do SSL from Neo4j.
Yeah.
And then for our web front end, we have that one set up to run through, I think, an ALB with SSO enabled.
Okay.
So that when you hit it, it automatically SSOs you to the web front end, which then will create the user, give you the user back, and then the web front end will connect directly to the database through TLS to Neo4j using the username and password.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had a time getting it to work with like the load balancers in the middle, and then we would find like I guess with when you're syncing all the data, and then you would run into all these weird timeout errors or all these weird unpredictable failures that were cryptic and then transient from the due to like networking, and then so like one of those things. Yeah.
Right. So for us, we don't use for the Python code to talk to Neo4j, we do not use an ELB or anything along those lines. We just
Okay.
talk directly to the backend.
Got it.
And they're in the same pod, in the same namespace, so the communication is limited there. Only the Python code is allowed to directly talk to Neo4j.
That's the ideal state. Yeah, that way you don't
Yeah.
have to go over like a separate cluster and then introduce all kinds of latency.
Yeah, and if we were going to allow access from other services, we would use an NLB with TLS termination.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about the NLBs is it's essentially like kind of not a load balancer. It's just like direct access to the host, and you can do TLS termination through it. So so it does make things a lot easier, and it works directly in like you can have an NLB that talks directly into a Kubernetes pod, so it can talk directly to the container. Yeah, so definitely, like, at least for the NLB, it's, I mean, for Neo4j itself, the NLB has been very nice in terms of being able to set it up without having to do anything weird, because it also like doesn't mess with the WebSockets and things like that either.
Yeah, I am curious though, just for the sake of experiment. I wonder. I don't know. I haven't heard of anybody using Envoy with Neo4j.
I actually really want. I really want an Envoy filter for Neo4j, and the reason that I want it is to implement some of the features in Neo4j Enterprise. Like, the only thing that I really truly want from Enterprise are the security features. And it's very frustrating that Neo4j hides their security features behind their Enterprise product. But like the thing that I really need is a security log. So like, unless you pay for Enterprise, you don't get a query log and you don't get a security log. So if there was an Envoy filter that you could use in front of Neo4j, you could just, for every query that comes in, you could make your own query log. And if you have a query log, you don't need a security log. So
yeah. I like
but
that
that
a lot.
would require its own filter, because it needs to actually understand the protocol. So it would need to handle WebSockets, and it would need to handle actually understanding the underlying protocol. I mean, I think the underlying protocol is mostly just like HTTP with WebSockets, right? So
yeah,
most likely it's just a regular HTTP filter. So maybe it would just magically work, but for the logging part, it would still need to be its own filter. So maybe it wouldn't be the hardest thing in the world, but I haven't investigated it at all. So
yeah.
I was hoping someone else would do that, but
Well, another Sunday afternoon project. If anybody is very curious about this kind of thing, I've been playing around a little bit with this on my free time, but yeah, more eyes welcome. It really sounds exciting.
yeah. I mean, the big thing is I don't need any of the features from Enterprise with the exception of the security features. Like, at this point, we don't need to cluster anything, and like, yeah. So like, most of the features that come with Enterprise for us are just like kind of wasted, and it's very expensive.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. I think because the clustering will add like another layer of complexity to it, and then you have to, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I saw that Sasha was mentioning something about it, or asking something about it in the channel.
Yeah.
But
he was doing something with, gosh, what was that? What was that other piece of tech that he was talking about? Something about like letting it actually scale all the writes, because they have quite a few accounts that they need to write to the graph. What did he say? I forget already. He did mention some idea about using Neo4j's built-in APOC like plugin.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, APOC to update the graph, because the amount of time between the amount of time spent sending the data back and forth between the Python process and Neo4j was a considerable amount of time for them. Whereas like with APOC, you send the data in and the APOC does the updates, and so there's less back and forth, I think is what he was talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, APOC does some smart stuff there. I'm kind of wary of introducing like another dependency though. I'm open to it if somebody wants to cut a PR to it, but you know, as much as possible, I wanted to let people have vanilla Neo4j. Here's your creds, go, and then here's your graph.
Well, so the good thing with APOC is it comes with vanilla Neo4j. It's just to enable it is slightly a pain in the ass because I think you need to put a jar file into a directory whenever it starts. But I think that's all you actually need to do. It's work. Yeah, that's the reason I haven't enabled APOC yet, because I just don't want to deal with it. We're not using APOC for anything yet, or don't have a strong need for it yet. But yeah, it comes with community version and enterprise version, and it's not a paid for feature. So
yeah, well, I'm open to it. Like if somebody else wants to add support for that or use that function somewhere, and you find that it like helps make the cleanup super fast. Yeah. Cool. All right, that's yeah. Anything else, you guys?
One thing, sounds like the APOC could just be a small change to the Docker compose, set it up for people. Wouldn't be that hard.
True.
Other thing is, Alex, I'm going to send you this. Sorry, I was kind of MIA for a second. Alex, I remember I did discover deep links. I'm going to send you this link.
Yes.
And just click on it. Let me know. I think this deep link should work. Just
Yeah.
I tried this a long time ago. It's whack.
Yeah.
But
no, I remember. Yeah. So there's this way that you can. Yeah, there is that, but oh god, there's gotta be something nicer than that. Let me
nothing nice. And actually, now think about it. You click on a link and it takes you there. It's great.
Okay. Wait, let me kind of sanitize this a little bit so I can post it.
yeah, it would be good to see, because like I would actually like to link to deep links to the console from like some of the information panels in our front end, because it's nice to be able to get data from the front end, but every once in a while you want to slightly modify the query. So
right.
Well, okay, the thing I don't like about this too is that it requires you to put your database username and password in the URL string.
Oh yeah, that's problematic. Okay.
Yep. So that's why it's gross. But
yeah.
The format is though if you use the connect URL parameter, and I can just copy the parameter, and that's let me clean this up a little bit.
Well, if you deep link without the username and password, but you have a cookie, will that work?
Well, probably.
It will. It will. Yeah, it will.
Okay.
Oh, that's true. Okay.
Yeah. So actually, if I docs this, I think I probably found this in Stack Overflow somewhere, but this was the format. User password.
Yeah, because maybe I can figure out a way in the reporting front end to auto log the people into the console so that they get a cookie, and then when they go over to it, it automatically works. I'll have to figure that out though.
Yeah. Kunal, are you almost done sanitizing, or should I do it?
Oh, sanitize the whole thing? You keep doing it. I just sanitized the one little.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, just that one argument. Alex, it did work for you, right? So it auto-populated everything.
Yeah.
Nice.
And you just
we had done this for vuln management to make the links easier to click in Jira, but
yeah. And it would be nice. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to paste it right here. So the full query that you would want to do would be something like this. Just put it like that. So in this particular example, your username is Neo4j and your password is Neo4j. I'm not sure like if it works if you get rid of that. You can kind of play with that.
Let me try that.
Wait, and this brings you to a deep link into the JavaScript?
What it does is that it will pre-populate the query command line thing with that string, and then so it's on the user to click on the play button.
Ah, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, that's more or less what it is. Yeah, auto logs you in and auto populates.
Okay.
So not a deep link in the sense that it'll bring it to the actual data, but a deep link in the sense that it'll have a pointer to the data.
Yeah, it puts the query in for you. That, I mean, that might be enough for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, so actually without the username and password, it puts the query in, but you still have to click the connect. You still have to log in. So.
Cool. All right, we're at the 6 o'clock hour. I don't want to take too much of you guys' time, but this was really good. This was a lot of good topics that we talked about today.
Yeah. Oh, and if you want, I can demo the front end
Yeah,
if we
sure.
stop the recording.
Yeah, sounds good. All right.